Good morning, everyone. We are at the halfway point with Chapel Women's. I can't believe we're halfway through. So I hope that y'all had a good little break. And so we are going to do community today. Next week we have fasting, which has been an interesting one for me to study and work on. So I'm really looking forward to next week too. So we have 4 more weeks after this. So I'm so glad that y'all are here with us this morning. So I'll start off with a little story. I just want to teach a little bit about community, and then we're going to do this panel. But growing up, my family all thought that I was going to be a radio DJ because almost every song that came on the radio, I knew the lyrics. By like the second or the third beat, I knew the song and I could sing it, and they just all thought that's what I would do. And it's this weird talent that I have, and I still have it today. I can not remember a conversation I had with somebody last week, but I can tell you a song that I heard in middle school from start to finish. I don't know why, but my brain just remembers these musical lyrics. And when I was doing college ministry way back in the day, there was one of the campuses I was working on did a Name That Tune contest. And I told my students, I was like, I could totally win that, totally. And they dared me to enter the contest, and I did, and I won. And so I won on Under Pressure by Queen, and the contestants on the stage all thought it was Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice, but I knew the beat was different. And so I won myself a DVD player, which was a huge deal because back then, all I had was a VCR, and DVD players had just come out. And so it was super fun. And so my family thought I would become a radio DJ, not just because I knew the lyrics, but because I just loved every song. I mean, as a teenager, every song that came on the radio, I was like, oh, I love this song. It's my favorite, and if they were to change the dial, I'd be like, don't change it. I love this song. And my family was always like, you say that about every song. But I really did. I was so passionate about it as a teenager about my love for music. And I feel the same way with that as we've been walking through these spiritual rhythms this fall. I love every single one of them. And so I want you to see what we've already been doing so far. You'll see on the screen, we started off with solitude, and it's so beautiful when we can get to the place where we are establishing rest, when we're meeting with Him and we're taking that deep breath and we're just experiencing that rest with Him. And then we talked about prayer and this posture of open hands, of expressing surrender and saying, not my will, but yours be done. And when we can get to the place where we can surrender our lives to God, it is life-changing for us. And then we talked about Bible meditation, and when we learn to love God's word and understand it and apply it to our lives and marinate it on in our minds, we nurture that transformation in our life. Again, it is another life-changing one. And so today we're going to be talking about community. And the first thing I would say about community is that I love community. I love it as much as solitude and prayer and Bible meditation. I love it all the same. And it's life-giving and it's beautiful. When we journey together, it can be life-changing for us. And it is a beautiful, meaningful thing. And so I don't want you to mistake my enthusiasm for community just like another song on the radio. Because each one of these spiritual rhythms that we've been looking at, they are all so, so good in our lives. So today we're going to talk about community, and it's so important because this one magnifies all the other spiritual rhythms. So when we get together, we share what we're learning in solitude and what we're praying about and what the Bible's teaching us. And when we talk about it together, it's like we join hands and we start putting into practice what we're learning in these rhythms. We help each other walk these things out. So it's so important that we do these things together. Now, on Sunday, Kevin preached out of 1 Peter chapter 2, and he talked about how we are living stones and we're being built into being a spiritual house. So you'll see this verse up on the screen, verses 4 and 5, it says, as you come to Him, the living stone, you, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house. And so when we come to Him, and we come to Him with open hands, right? We say, I want to follow you. I want to give my life to you. He immediately sets us up into that spiritual house. And we're side by side with other people. We're rubbing shoulders with them. We're holding hands. And so that's how it starts. We come to know Him and we get set up with Him. And so going on in that passage, you'll see on the screen, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness and into His wonderful light. And so what Peter's talking about is if you are a Christian and you are walking out your faith, he is calling you from darkness into light. And even if you find yourself in a place of darkness later on, if you continue walking out your faith, he will continue to call you out of darkness into light. And so that process of walking out your faith, that process of moving from darkness to light is practicing spiritual rhythms. That's what it looks like in our lives. And so I know that it takes effort and it takes intentionality, but the end result is we end up in the light. And what naturally happens when we end up in the light is we want to tell people about it. We want to declare the praises of him who has called us out of that. And we want people to know. And that's why community is so vital. It's so important. So when you look at this verse, if you want to go back to that verse in verse 9, look at those words. It says that we are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, and a holy nation. And I want you to notice that all of those words are plural. It doesn't say you're a chosen person, a royal priest, a holy resident. It's this collective mindset. That's what it's about. So there's a community aspect to this proclamation that Peter's giving us. He's saying we want you to be in this together. And now the Israelites in the Old Testament, they understood this collective mindset, this idea of being in community. Because we see them like confessing their sins, but not just confessing their sins, but the sins of the nation. Or asking for mercy, and not just mercy in their lives, but mercy on them as a nation. And so they really understood this collective mindset. But in our society, in our culture, we are very, very much more individualistic. When we talk about salvation, it's a personal decision between you and Jesus. It's a personal relationship between you and Jesus. And even though both of those are true, once we step into that relationship with him, he moves us over to the spiritual house. And he puts us side by side with other people. And so when we make that decision to start walking with him, it's like we get added to the group text. Right? We join in, and we're now all in this together. We are now part of a royal priesthood. It was never meant to be you and Jesus. It's meant to be you and Jesus and your community. That's what the picture is supposed to look like. Because if you don't have community in your life, you're going to get into trouble. And I'll tell you how we get into trouble. If it's just you and Jesus, then you're going to make your relationship between you and Jesus, you're going to tailor fit it to you, just like you do the settings on your phone. You're going to give Jesus access to the areas you want him to have access to, and areas you don't want him to have access to, you'll leave out, right? And you'll set up notifications. This is the stuff I want you to notify me on, Jesus, and this is the stuff I don't want you to notify me about, right? And we choose when we're going to put him on silent, and we choose when we're going to communicate with him. And so if it's just between you and Jesus, you're going to end up tailoring your relationship with him the way you want it to be. And you may not even realize it. It may not even be intentional. But when you're in community with other people, they notice that. And they're like, hey, no, you need to, that area of your life needs to be open to the Lord. And there's people in your life that are challenging you, and they're encouraging you. They're seeing your blind spots. When you get stuck in places of like shame or guilt, you have people telling you, no, that's not who you are. You are a child of God. And we need those other voices in our minds reminding us of who he is in our lives. And so when we're in community, people model that for us, as well as they challenge us in our own lives. And so it's so important that we have that. And so, because Jesus never expects us to walk this road alone, but yet we do. We do that all the time. We're so afraid to tell people, I'm struggling, I don't know something, I'm scared. We just feel like we have to hold all of this in ourselves, like I've made a bad decision financially, or I've lost my temper, or my kid's wayward and I don't know how to bring my child back, or my anxiety's through the roof. Right? And we just feel like we have to keep all of this in, or maybe it's even spiritual disciplines. Like I don't read my Bible because I don't know where to start, and I don't know who to ask. And I'm embarrassed to tell anyone that I don't know where to start. Or I don't read my Bible because I don't understand it, and I don't want anyone to know I don't understand it, because aren't we just supposed to understand it? Or I want to trust God in this area of my life, but I have absolutely no idea how to do it, and I don't want anyone to know that I don't know how to do it. Right? And so we live in this cycle where we feel like we should know everything, and we should be capable, we should be strong enough, but I don't know why we put that pressure on ourselves. Jesus never asks us of that. He never expects us to be that way, but yet we feel this pressure that we've got to do everything all on our own. But when we do that, when we keep all of our burdens to ourselves and the things we don't know about, we don't ask people for help, that's exactly where the devil wants us to be. And if you remember 2 weeks ago, we talked about what was the instructions that Satan gave his demons. Y'all remember that? He told them, keep them busy. Keep them busy. Because if we're busy, we're not going to connect with Jesus and we're not going to connect with other people. And the devil knows that's where the power is. Is if he can just keep us busy, he takes away the power that we have that's available to us. And so community is where we link arms. It's where we work to create these rhythms in our lives and we help to flesh them out. And it's people that we learn from, that we were able to share with, and people that celebrate with us. And so when you think about like losing weight, if you go to the gym once, you're probably not going to lose any weight. But if you go for 4 months, you probably will. If you go for a year, you probably will. And community is those people that are getting you to the gym every day. They are the people that are riding the treadmill with you. They're lifting weights with you. And then they go with you when you try on that dress and you're 2 sizes down and they celebrate. Like that's the picture of community. And so what I want us to do now is we're gonna do a little panel. So I want to invite up my friends. We've got Kristen Freeman, Lorraine Kennedy, and Helen Eberson. And they're going to come up here, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves for a minute. And then I've got a couple questions that I'm going to kick this off. But then if I want to see what you guys want to know. And so if you want to text in the questions that you have for them, and we're just going to go from there. And so why don't we start with Helen. Helen, if you want to tell everyone just a little bit about yourself, how long you've been at the chapel and your family.
Good morning. My name's Helen Eberson. I have been at the chapel for 12 years. I came to LSU and got plugged in at Refuge. And then my husband's name is Abram, and we have 2 kids, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and then a baby due in March.
I'm Kristen, and pretty similar to Helen. I joined the chapel in 2010 through the college ministry and have been here ever since. And still volunteer with the Refuge Ministry. I don't have kids, but I have 2 cats and 5 chickens and 1 rabbit. And yeah, I'm married to Conrad, who works for LSU now in the art and design department. And I'm a wedding photographer, so we're just 2 creative people on a little farm.
Yep. I'm Lorraine Kennedy. My husband and I came to the chapel many years ago. Then we left and he pastored for 20 years and we came back 5 years ago. So I have 3 kids and 11 grandchildren.
Yay. All right. Well, let's jump into our first question for them is, when did you first experience Christian community?
Before we answer that real quick, sorry, this was me rubbing you.
I
I like
was like,
that she received my rubbing, like it didn't stop.
That's nice of Tori to do
She just
that.
wants me to rub her back. Okay. This is, if you have questions, this is the time to start sending them in. So as you listen, and if you have one, there's a lot of women in this room who value community, but we have there's a lot of questions around it. So take your phone out, go ahead, and this is your time to send me in those questions, okay? All right, sorry. Now you can go. You can get another rub.
Yes. So yeah, you want to go for it?
Sure. When my husband and I started in Christian community many years ago when our kids were young, we had just been doing church on Sunday morning. You see people and they say, "How are you?" And you say, "Well, I'm fine. I'm fine. How are you?" "I'm fine." It was that level of relationship. It was just, you didn't reveal yourself. You just saw people on Sunday morning. Maybe you served, maybe you taught Sunday school. We did. But still the relationships had a shallowness to it. Then when we started meeting in homes for home groups, it became family. The dynamic totally changed because you were going to be with these people the next week, and they were going to ask you how you were doing, and you were going to ask them, and you got to have a meal together, and you really started being willing to say your real stuff because it was a small group, and you started building trust with one another. And in that very first group we were in is the time that we felt God calling us into ministry. And we had a young family. My husband had a business. And that was a big decision. And that group offered to fast for 3 days for us so we could hear God's voice. Is that not incredible? I mean, that was a sacrifice, a huge sacrifice. And they did. We all did that together. And of course, we heard God's voice speaking. And so that was our first experience with sacrificial love in a group.
Thank you, Lorraine. Did you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So the first time I experienced Christian community was my junior year of college here in Baton Rouge. And I had, just a lot of relational baggage from my home growing up and then from my first 2 years of college with just different roommates. And so getting to live with 4 other women who were pursuing Christ, it was very, just life-giving and life-changing for when I would be short-tempered, when I would be passive-aggressive, when I would be hold a grudge towards them over silly things. Well, they seem silly. I mean, but it was such a heart issue for me, things I would get mad at them about. And then they would treat me with love and grace and kindness, and it was like, oh, wow, that's really different than how I grew up. And, oh, that's really different than the past 2 years. And just to see how God used them to heal a lot of those wounds just from my past, and then teach me how to model Christ and how to extend that to others, what they were extending to me. And it was cool because I look back and, it was neat because that house that we lived in, many people were drawn to it, and I think, well, because we were all so different and we're bearing with one another in love because of Christ, and so people were drawn to that community. And that's what Jesus says, they will know us by the way that we love one another. And so just a really cool thing to look back on.
Yeah. And I think that what she's talking about is a little bit of how Christian community is different from just regular friendships, right? And so, Kristen, how would you say your relationships, your Christian community is different from just other friendships in your life?
Well, when I was first introduced to what a Christian community can look like, being vulnerable and challenging and steadfast, that was 12 years ago. And over the last 12 years, I've encountered a lot of different traumatic events, or have just had really hard markers throughout my story. And having those people around me literally scoop me up off the ground whenever I just couldn't even think about going to the Lord about it, because it just was is God good? They come around me and they show me that God is good, and they escort me to the cross and plop me down at the feet of Jesus so that he can do the work in me. And so, gosh, most of my friends are believers because I have a very small friend group. But the friends that I have that aren't believers, there's always a lacking there. There's always a wall there. I feel in conversation and vulnerability, you can only go so deep because there's just a blockage there because the spiritual connection isn't there. And so, I guess that would be the difference for me. Is I know that my Christian community is there to rally around me whenever I'm getting thrown the lies of is God good? Is he worth it? Are you enough?
Yeah. It's kind of like those bumper rails, when you're at the amusement park, and you're going on that little thing, you've got those friends are like those bumpers, oh no, you don't, that's not who God is. Yeah. No, this is who you are. And they keep you on track. Absolutely. Do you want to add to that, Lorraine?
I agree with you. They're radically different. And when I got in a D group, 5 years ago, that was a deeper level of community even than I had experienced before, because it's just 5 women. And I think following the Hear Journal and sharing with that group of people what God is doing in your life, that's a dynamic no other friendship has. And telling them, this is how I've been meeting with God this week, that's a very tender, intimate thing for me. And I found even that first group, their tears. They're tears about that because it's deep. And so you're sharing something that you're not going to share with your other casual friends. You're talking about deep things. And so the connection to me is so much stronger. And I love casual friends too. I love going shoe shopping with somebody. But it's not the same as really telling, oh, this is what I'm struggling with. Here's the real me. And trusting these people with the real you, and them trusting you with their true hearts, so that you can pray for them, so that you can scoop them up and take them to the cross. So I don't think there's any comparison. I don't think I've ever had a true good friend that did not get birthed out of Christian community.
Well, I love what you said there about trusting, knowing that what you're sharing is being held safe. And so we have a question here that says, how do we become vulnerable when the culture, even in the church, where it's not truly safe? People don't know what to do with your issue or sin, and it just ends up being gossip. So how can you speak into that? And all of you, consider that. Because a lot of times we talk about vulnerability here, but that does take a level of trust. I personally have a hard time doing that also, knowing that what I'm about to share with you isn't going to be heard in a way that's not accurate and then shared in a way that's not accurate. So how have y'all worked through that over time, being able to truly be vulnerable with the people around you?
It's a great question.
For me, whenever I was first introduced into like a D group format, when I first came to the chapel through Refuge, my leader would always say vulnerability breeds vulnerability. So there's always that risk with vulnerability. I mean, in any capacity, like, that if you say something that you hold dear to your heart, you could get accepted or rejected. Like, there's always that. And so for me, I've continued to just like speak out over the girls that I disciple of like, it's always going to be a scary thing. And though I ask, everyone to just like hold what we speak as sacred and not leave the group, there's always that chance. But like, I think it's worth it. Sure. Because you're exposing so much, and you're bringing sometimes darkness to light. Yeah. And in that, there is healing. And so, I love vulnerability. I always preach it. But yeah, it is hard because you don't, at the end of the day, you don't know someone else's motives or, what they're going to do.
Absolutely.
How do you determine if someone is safe? Because I think it's valid to say we don't want to share all of our deepest, darkest issues and fears with like everybody.
Right.
So how do you determine if someone is safe?
Kristen said the Holy Spirit. I think, yes, the Spirit. And I think just being a part of a local body, a church, and getting involved like here today, like in a community, one that's more structured, but it's meant to be organic, like from the structure, And so I think, and then forming your small groups through that, and the Holy Spirit, and then building trust with people. Like I'm a very verbal person. Like I will just ask someone like, can I trust you to not tell anyone what I just told you, and
it's a great thing.
And I think for me, something I've had to do is when I have shared something vulnerable, and then if I feel like the friend that I shared with, the Christian friend, like they're not doing anything about it. Sounds really controlling, but it's like, if I'm like, I literally just shared something with you and you haven't brought it up, or like, I don't even know if you're praying for me, me calling or just texting and just saying like, hey, remember what I shared with you? Like, have you been praying about it? Do you have anything that you want to encourage me with? Just acknowledging, like, I shared something with you, and do you have a response? I don't know. That's just me, but it has worked, because then sometimes they're a friend who is slower to speak, or they might be not know if I want feedback or something, and so giving them the opportunity to speak. Sometimes it really does open the door for that to continue.
That's good.
I think you're most vulnerable with the smallest group of people. You're not going to, in a larger group, share the most tender, deep parts that you're struggling with. You need a small group, and trust is built a little bit over time. And I agree with you. If one person is vulnerable in a small group, then it does open the way for other people to be vulnerable, because it is, then it's a shared thing. And I love the word sacred, because I think it is sacred that when we're in a small group and we share, then that is between that group of people only. Don't go home and tell your spouse, even. You pray for that person, and then come back the next week and say, how are you doing? How are you doing with that struggle? It does matter. It does matter when someone shares that we are praying about it, and that we interchange with them about it. And just when someone's sharing, touch builds that connection with people, doesn't it? I mean, when you're struggling and someone hugs you or touches you, someone that you know well, it communicates that they're really listening, they're tracking with you. So there's several ways to build that, but it takes time too.
Absolutely.
And I think the process happens like if someone shares something vulnerable with you and you're like, I don't know what to do with that. That's I don't know how to help you. I don't know how to fix that. Like we're fixers, right? So when someone shares something with us, we're thinking in our heads, well, what can I do to make your situation better? But there are some issues that people are dealing with that you're like, I cannot fix that, And so I think when we're in those situations, a very simple thing you can do is just to say, I'm really sorry that this is so hard, and I want you to know that I'm praying for you. And it's just as simple as that. They just want to know that they're heard. And they probably don't even expect you to fix it, because they probably know in their mind, you can't fix it, because if I could have fixed it, I would have, But I think if we can just say to them, we take what they've said and we hold it in a precious way and say, I know that's really hard, and I want you to know I'm praying for you, and then following up with them. And I think that starts a pattern. When you follow up with them, then the next time, if you have something, you're like, okay, I've built a relationship with that person, and it becomes cyclical,
Absolutely.
Can I just add one little, like off of what Jen said? I think too, when it is something that there is a next step, like if they would like to go see a counselor, or, they need to have a conversation with someone, and just offering I'm willing to come with you, like to the counselor's office, or I'm willing to call the counselor with you. I'm willing to go to the doctor with you. Just offering like a presence with what they're going through.
Totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm willing to get with you outside of this group, and let's pray together. Journeying, your tagline was journeying together. And so it's not just your group time, it's all those other times too, where you're loving one another well.
And I think the Holy Spirit prompts you to do that, where you'll have a friend kind of on your heart and on your mind, and you'll go, well, maybe I should just reach out to them. Let's see how they're doing. And so just kind of stepping into that. But you were talking about fixing, and I saw this question. We all have husbands that like to fix, or maybe we don't have husbands, but husbands like to fix, right? But Christian community can be hard outside of a women's group if your husband isn't on the same page as you spiritually. And so you come here, you're filled up, but what happens when you leave this place if your home doesn't exude Christian community? So my question here is, have you and your husbands always been on the same spiritual path? And if not, how did you navigate those rough waters? And so that's not necessarily community focused, but it truly makes this a little bit more difficult if your husband's not right there with you. So maybe your husband, or maybe you've gone through this and walked through this with somebody else whose husband, this was, just one of those hard things to go through. So anybody?
That's a tough question.
It is a tough question.
We had mainly been on the same page, but when we came back here, I have jumped in more to community through the women's groups than my husband has. And we were going to a community group in the evenings, and he didn't want to, we got out of that, really his choice, because He doesn't want to get out at night. And we're older, and he doesn't want to get out at night as much anymore. And I have to honor that. And so I have found my Christian community in the women's groups since we've been back here. And so that's been a little navigating for me, because I really love us doing most things together. But I've just embraced where we are in that, and I love and need Christian community more than he does. He's more of a loner. He just needs me and God. But so I have just embraced what is instead of what I wish it were.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And then also leaning on your friends here to pray for you. You know, I know some ladies in this room who husbands are not believers, and we've prayed together. There's a group of them together that prays often for their husbands, that they might step in and accept Christ. So I think it's a big part of what we're all trying to do, right? That's really good. Okay.
My husband is a godly man, though. He's a
Yes.
Christian. He's going in.
Sorry.
We're walking the journey
I
together.
don't mean to confuse that. No, that's really good. So at the end here, I'm going to ask, Lorraine touched on D groups, which I don't know if you knew that I was going to end up talking about this at the end. But we're going to transition into some time at the table here in just a moment. But I am going to talk about D groups, because she mentioned a lot about how this works really well in small group settings. Vulnerability works in that way, and so we'll talk about D groups in just a bit. But is there anything else you'd want to add? We've got a few more minutes. It's 9:43.
Well, one of the things that I asked them in preparation for today, I said, what are 3 words you would use to describe community? And so I'm going to ask Helen. Helen, her 3 words were necessary, hard, and fun. And so I would love to know why you chose those words.
So necessary, you know, just as Jen has talked to us earlier today, of like, it's part of being a believer. It's part of what God has called us to, and it's a joy, it's a blessing to get to be a part of Christian community, and we need one another to grow into the image of Christ. And hard, I think it's really hard. I think based off of like everything you said from when you were teaching, it's like, it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to invite someone over, and it's like, oh, I just yelled at my husband. Like, they might have heard me, you know, when they're knocking on the door, and I'm mad at my kids. And, you know, it's like I'm in a frenzy, and I don't want them to know that. But like I said, I've just tried to practice voicing, hey, I just yelled at my kids, and like, I'm just confessing my sin to you. You know, would you, pray for me in that? And then later I usually ask them, like my fellow mom friends, or it doesn't even have to be a mom friend, another Christian, hey, like, what do you do when your son or your child won't do this? How do I handle this? You know, because I want to point my children to Christ. I don't want to just do behavior modification. And I don't know, I'm a young mom. And so just inviting people to speak into my life and into my blind spots, and show them that I am weak and I need Christ every day, you know. And I think it's hard too, because I want my house to be clean. I want the food to taste good if I'm going to invite someone over. All these things, and that can be a blocker for community, because then I'm like, oh, I don't have enough food, so I'm not going to invite them over. Rather than, please come over and we'll just supplement with whatever's like in the pantry. You know, I don't know, just being vulnerable in that way. And then fun. I think it's fun because, like, you get to do life with other people, and you, through those rough, like, patches, like the sin in our lives, people getting to see that authenticity is built. And it's like, oh, they really know me, and they love me. They're still coming over. Like, I'm still going to their house. You know, it really is fun, and getting to invite to birthday parties and just be a part of each other's lives. There really is a supernatural joy that comes from Christian community.
Well, and I think one other question that I think we should cover before we leave is, like, how do you fit community into your life if you're really busy? Like, I know that you have a bunch of small kids. I know Kristen runs her own business, and Lorraine is volunteering with ESL, and it's got 11 grandkids. Like, how do you fit community into your life with the lifestyle that you're in? Is there anything that y'all would suggest, offer?
There's always time. It's a matter if you prioritize it or not. And so I think whenever you see the value in something, you prioritize that something. So how much do you value sanctification through community? How much do you value being known through community? How much do you value like shame-free fun, like things that are important? It's like if you value it, then you're going to prioritize it. And so, if you can get together with a group of girls or with whoever it may be in your Christian community once a week, start there, or once every other week, start there, but work it into your day-to-day because it's so valuable and it's so rich.
Yeah, I think like what Kristen said, and in my day-to-day schedule, it's like, okay, when the kids wake up from rest time, it's like I have these hours and then it's dinner. So instead of viewing that as like that's this time slot and that's dinner, it's like, okay, well, who can I invite to come during those times, and not trying to, I got to get rid of these obligations I need to do to be able to live in community, but how can I invite people into what I'm already doing? And I was talking to my friend Natalie, and we were talking about, because she has little kids too, and it's easier for me to serve someone, like, oh, I'll bring you a meal, I'll do this for you, which that's hard too, like in a lot of ways. But it's been hard for me to accept being served and to let community love me. And just a practical thing is my husband he's the ESL director here at the church, and he works on Wednesday nights and has gone till really late at night. And it's like, Natalie and her family have invited me and my kids to come over every Wednesday night for dinner. And it's like, I didn't want to accept that at first because it's like, oh, that's a lot. Like, I don't want them to get annoyed with, all these thoughts you have and, oh, I want to repay them and all this. And it's like, no, sister in Christ inviting us over. We're going to go. Like, this is an opportunity for them to love and serve us. And why I don't want to rob them of that. And just the authenticity that's been like born from that is just, it's a supernatural thing. So
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, that's great. Well, what we'd like to do now, we've got a few minutes left. So if you look on your table, you'll have a little handout. And so there's a little continuum of 1 to 10. And so there's the 4 words, and I'm trying to remember what I wrote down. Desire, vulnerability, time, and people. Is that what it says? Okay, I don't have it in front of me. So what I want you to do is I just want you to take a minute and I want you to look at that continuum, and I want you to ask yourself, what is my level of desire of even being in community? Like, have I listened to everything in here? Like, yeah, I'm not going to do any of that, or like, I'm not going that direction. I don't want anybody knowing my junk, And so I just want you to put a little D on that continuum somewhere. Where do you think you fall on your desire to be in community? Where do you think you fall on your ability to be vulnerable? Where do you fall on your time? How can you do this? Like, how does that all fit together? And then people, like, are there people that come to mind that you're like, I can ask her to go have coffee? Or if you can't think of anyone in your life that you're like, can't think of anyone that I even want to attempt to do something like this with. So I want you to just take a few minutes and put, a D, a V, a T, and a P on that continuum of just where you kind of are, so you can have a visual picture of what community looks like for you. And then at the bottom, you'll see that says 3 names. And so, each week we've been giving you kind of like some fun homework and things you can try to practice that rhythm. And so for this week, for community, I want you to think of it, at least one person, if not 2 or 3, that you can at least reach out to this week and schedule coffee, lunch, something. Who is someone that you're like, I really would love to get to know her better, or I already know her really well, but I think I really need to share something with her that's going on in my life. Wherever you are on that spectrum, but who are some names of people that you're like, you may not have coffee with them next week, but you're going to reach out to them by next week and set a time on the calendar, and you're going to make that happen. So I'm going to give y'all just a few minutes to do the little continuum, write down your names, and then Tori will come back and close us.
And I'll talk about D groups. Sound good?
Sound good? All right.
All right.